and Mike Roman from the first book, who doesn't make an appearance in Sins of the Mother.
Lakshmi was a good character. I liked her. She was kind of a badass. She was going to go get answers.
She doesn't take no for an answer.
As Caitlin's of an age where she may never settle down and have children, Lakshmi sort of become her mentee, but a daughter figure to her. And that was something I wanted to explore of like, well, Caitlin's one to judge her mother for abandoning her as a child, but what would she do in the same situation? So I got to play with that relationship and build Lakshmi as her own character, but certainly there's a large part of her that wants to walk in her footsteps.
Talking about the different characters in your book, if you're writing a series, you get to know the recurring characters intimately. How do you craft ancillary characters such as Sheriff Boswell Martin, the Larson family, or Hazel the bartender, who are all very compelling characters in their own right, but they are really not part of the continuing series?
When I start out, since I'm writing crime fiction, I sort of write two stories. So obviously these ancillary characters live the first story, which I call the crime line, which is my timeline of there's something happening out there, and until my heroine essentially disrupts their plan, what would happen if she was never there? And so I sort of build out these characters out of necessity, certainly, meaning we definitely would need a law enforcement presence, so Sheriff Martin has to happen. And I like to set my books in real settings. So in this case, I researched the county that the book takes place in, Coos County, Oregon, understand the size of that law enforcement community, build a character that I think would fit in there. Part of that area of Southern Oregon and Northern California, it's referenced in the book. There is sort of thought of as a joke by some people and very seriously taken by other people is the concept of the state of Jefferson. That is a 51st state made out of counties of Northern California and Southern Oregon. I kind of give him a tolerance for that concept because there's certainly people in the area who have that flag on their bumper sticker. So it was fun to build, like, what would that man's job have to be? He's well-meaning, but he also has to live in this area where he needs to be elected. The same thing, the Larson family, what are these traditional, powerful families in that area like? That one's not specifically based on anyone, but, I mean, Oregon is a state that was founded as a white-only state. Everywhere has plenty of racism, but that is part of its history, and therefore I wanted a group that may have been there since the beginning and would still sort of harbor that superiority. And then someone like Hazel, you look for the helpers and you look for the everyday the unsung heroes are some of the most fun, I think. Some people with some hard mileage to them, but also just with the deepest hearts who will help strangers out of nowhere. So it really comes out of necessity of those characters. But then since I come from a Hollywood background, specifically as an actor, I try to write these characters in a way that an actor who might only be going in for a 5 lines part, meaning they only get 5 lines or less in a movie or TV show, would still love to play that part. Or even if I'm writing someone who might be a bad guy, I want to write it so that a movie star might like the character enough that they would work for scale, meaning just for the union minimum. So I try to imbue them each with their own real way of talking and being, and sort of let them play from there.
A lot of our listeners are first-time writers, and they're very interested about the creative process. Can you describe your process from concept to delivery?
Oh, I'm going to try. This is definitely a question I've asked authors before, and it is constantly evolving. I will say that. My first novel, which was unpublished, was probably a 10-year process, which began as a screenplay, including a character named Caitlin Bergman as a supporting character. And then over time, I realized I had done enough research that I finally wanted to write my novel. So I started writing a screenplay as an outline, meaning I had a 100-page outline with dialogue and all the scenes sort of put together. So that was actually really, I'm not going to say easy for me, but that was a great way to start. And then I covered much about the industry and started going to writers' conferences and workshopping that and finally got better. When it came time to write the first book that sold, Come and Get Me, that book I wrote in about 2 years, and I did not write on an outline at all. I let the rabbits run wild, as they say, seated the pants it, and I ended up with a book that was 165,000 words. So I wrote Lord of the Rings, but as a crime novel. So then that thing where someone's like, well, just write 1,000 words a day, and in 90 days you'll have your book. And I'm like, well, I wrote for 165 days. So since I was setting it in a real place, from a lot of which from memory, I needed to explore those areas. And I would even write scenes where I'm like, this will not be in the book, but I need to write this to know what happened so that later I can just condense it. So I did that, and then I wrote a screenplay version of that huge meandering text, which allowed me to pare down that story to, again, a 100-page screenplay so that I could go back. And then the final book that was published was probably around 80,000 words. So that was about a 2-year process. Then this book, Sins of the Mother, which is available September 8th, began when I sold the first book. They said, is this part of a series? And I said, yes, because I was already working on another Caitlin Bergman book. And they said, fantastic. What's the next book? And I told them, and like, okay, cool. And then once we got about 4 or 5 months into that contract, they're like, oh, could the second book be something else? So Sins of the Mother became something I wrote off a pitch. I gave them pitches for like 2 or 3 line pitches for about 11 plots or stories, technically. And they picked one, and I said, fantastic. It involved a mass grave, Caitlin's search for her mother, and a religious cult. And that was all I kind of went on. So while doing publicity for the first book, as well as all the stuff that a first-time author has to deal with, such as, set up a social media presence, and, learn how to do all the publicity marketing stuff and set up your events. But I also needed to start writing my second book because I was on contract. And so I was very pleased to say that I was able to write off a very rough, maybe 10-beat outline. I was able to write Sins of the Mother in under 5 months. It was a very fun process this time. And so I guess it's a lot of my process from concept to delivery. Especially once you have a contract, you have to deliver. And the good thing is, one of the first events I attended was T. Jefferson Parker was talking about one of his latest books. And I asked him, I'm like, hey, you're on book 20 and you're on like 1 a year. How do you do it? He's like, well, after you do it once, you have that confidence because you know you can do it again. It's very true. I find as I continue to write, I'm getting better, I'm getting faster. And since someone has said yes to me, I now know that I don't have to doubt it as much. I still doubt myself all the time, as one does, but I know that I can finish a book.
You classify your books as literary, thrillers and mystery. Why literary?
I love to read all parts of the genre, but I particularly am drawn to stories where the character goes through something human, realistic, and something that cannot leave them unchanged. And I find that the authors who I like who do that well often write standalones because of the realistic arc of doing this to someone. You can only run into so many serial killers. Even FBI profilers, whose job it is to find serial killers, can really only run into so many in their lives.
I often wonder that when watching, like, Criminal Minds. It's like, really? Are there really enough serial killers to have one pop up every week?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're right. I mean, British mystery television, obviously, you can't go anywhere in England without being murdered by someone in a country that has very little crime. So I want the books to be more about the character than the solving of a crime or a mystery. I lean more toward the literary slant of as far as character development. And hopefully prose. Obviously, there are conventions to thrillers and mysteries that you must sort of follow to stay in the genre, but I want it to feel more like a book that changes the reader and maybe also explores some deeper issues than I might normally explore in a traditional mystery.
Are you working on any new books now?
The answer is yes. As much as a 4-month-old baby will allow me to work on new books. But I am. The market will depend on how the contract continues, of course, but there is another Caitlin Bergman book in the works, as well as a standalone thriller and a Mike Roman book, who readers may recognize from the first book, Come and Get Me.
Can you give our listeners your website so they can find you and your books?
Certainly. I'm very easy to find at augustnorman.com. That is spelled like it sounds. August like the month, Norman like the people from the north of France. augustnorman.com. You can sign up there for my newsletter, which, of course, lets you know about any contests and giveaways I have going.
Well, August, we thank you so much for joining us. We loved this book. It was a quick read. I couldn't put it down.
I thank you very much, and this has truly been a pleasure.
When your next book comes out, be sure and let us know so we can shout it out on the program and say we knew him when.
I will stalk you like a dogged investigative journalist.
Well, we hope you and your growing family are staying safe and well, and we wish you all the best, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Same to you. Everybody stay safe.
Thank you, August.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
August.
I really liked this book. I thought it was extremely well laid out. The story of Caitlin She was abandoned as a child by her mother, and of course, that's not giving anything away. But she goes to Oregon when a body of a woman is discovered, and they think it's her mother, and she is called to identify her. And that's where the story begins.
Her mother gave her away in adoption to a police detective. She pretty much kind of gave, like, here, have a baby.
Yeah.
So she has always had a sense of abandonment and insecurity, I guess, as a lot of people who are adopted do. They wonder. She's kind of on a journey, and she has no idea who her real father is. She does have some idea about her mother, but
yeah, she was more concerned about who her father was than she was about her mother.
Yeah, because she did have some idea of her mother, and she had resentments towards her mother.
A lot of resentment against her mother. As anybody would. I mean,
it's understandable. But as August said in the interview, people who do give away their children in adoption, they not necessarily are doing so out of any kind of malice. They realize that they might not be ready to have a child, and they pass that child along to a loving family who may not be able to have children. So it can be noble.
Very true, but I did like the twist at the end when they revealed who her father was.
She was definitely on a journey of discovery, I'd say, and kind of stumbles into this cult that's operating in Oregon.
Well, they started in California.
Right. So she's thrown in the middle of this cult, and then there's a white supremacist family who's wreaking havoc in the area, and she's kind of stuck in the middle. So it was a very good story.
I thought the things about the state of Jefferson were really interesting. I read something about it, but I didn't realize it was that much of a thing out there.
Yeah, that would shake up the regional area, I would think, if they took a couple counties from Oregon and a couple counties from California and made them a whole new state.
Yeah, if their basis is what they are calling for, a white state, I just wonder what that would do to the voting process in the U.S.
Nobody said it was a good idea.
Well, we hope our listeners will check out Sins of the Mother. As August said, it will be available September the 8th. We found it very well done, and we highly recommend it.
Oh, absolutely. And you can tell that August has a background in screenwriting.
And you could picture the scenes. You could picture the area. His descriptions were spot on. He did a wonderful job. So.
Absolutely. We can't wait for the next installment of Caitlin Bergman's adventures.
Yes, but she does get some answers in this story, but there's a lot more she wants to know.
Don't we all?
Yes. Okay, well, we hope you will check that book out.
My new and noteworthy this week is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. It comes out in paperback on September 1st, put out by William Morrow Paperbacks. Rear Window meets Get Out in this gripping thriller from a critically acclaimed and New York Times notable author, in which the gentrification of a Brooklyn neighborhood takes on a sinister new meaning.
My new and noteworthy book is Cut to the Bone by Ellison Cooper. It's number 3 in the Agent Sayer Altair series. It came out on July 14th from Minotaur Books. A bus full of high school students has disappeared from Washington, D.C., and FBI neuroscientist Sayer Altair must hunt down the culprit, who has a link to her own past. The next book is Varnished Without a Trace by friend of the show, Misty Simon. It is by Kensington Press, and it comes out on September 29th. It is number 5 in her Tally Graver mystery series. Tally's looking forward to Christmas with her boyfriend, Max. but a bingo game leads to murder. Misty's one of our favorites, and we're always happy to see a new Tallygraver mystery. Trivia! Last week's question was, Bleak House by Charles Dickens is the ultimate